The church should play its role, and the church's role is to share the gospel, but at the same time is to take care of the poor and the people who are suffering. And this is what Jesus was doing. He was taking care of people in different ways. And Jesus had a compassionate heart. He had love toward everyone. And he was looking for the weak people and the poor. And we want to do what he wants us to do.
You're listening to Journey of Hope, Heart for Lebanon's podcast. We'll be talking about stories of change and discipleship happening in the country of Lebanon. I'm your host, Elio Constantine. Today we're talking about the earthquake that happened 1 year ago and hit Syria and Turkey. It was a devastating earthquake that happened in the early mornings of February 6, 2023, to be exact, at 4:17 a.m., with a magnitude of 7.6. After that earthquake, the two other shock waves were also very, very strong, and it resulted in thousands of casualties. Lebanon, and to be exact, the Heart for Lebanon's ministry center in the Bekaa is 230 miles away from the epicenter. I was in Beirut at that night, which is 240 miles away from the epicenter, and we felt it. Lebanon did not witness casualties, it did not witness a lot of damage, but the earthquake was felt in a very strong way, even 230 and 240 miles away. The significance of Heart for Lebanon's Hope Evangelical Church, to be exact, is that it is situated less than 15 miles away from the Syrian border. And the Hope Evangelical Church was prepared to respond to the families who are in need. Lebanon witnessed a huge influx of more refugees because of the earthquake into Lebanon seeking shelter. For a little context, Lebanon is on the Mediterranean, and it is bordered from its east and north by the country of Syria. So it is a strategic location and has been a strategic location for years and years for people from all over the area to come and seek refuge. And Heart for Lebanon has been working relentlessly for the past 17 years to always be prepared to respond to the families who are looking for safety, looking for shelter. With me today, I have Bashir, who is our field manager and the pastor of the Hope Evangelical Church in Zahle. Bashir, thank you for taking the time joining me today. I would love to go over this past year of what happened. We talked about the earthquake. We talked about the massive, massive negative impact it had on people's lives. The death toll is crazy, and the world has never seen such a devastating earthquake in recent history. Bashir, how did this earthquake affect the families we serve?
Yes, thank you, Elio, for hosting me. Just want to say that even though there are many crises happened or are happening in the Middle East, God is always at work. God gave us many opportunities to share the gospel with many, many people during this time. And we as Heart for Lebanon are responding to this crisis. So this earthquake affected many families in Syria and killed thousands of people there. And at the end, many people came from Syria to Lebanon as a result. And we were thinking since the first moment of the earthquake, how can we respond to this crisis? Many people died, and many people are coming to Lebanon. So what is our role? How can we help? We were thinking of how to support them through the local churches. And this is what we did, supporting the families or the victims of the earthquake through the local churches or the evangelical churches in Syria.
Wow.
We tried to help them by providing physical needs, and we provided food portions, we provided blankets, provided winter clothes, we provided toys for kids, we provided school materials also. So this is the way of how we responded to the crisis that happened last year. Also, we started to think of different ways to support indirectly the families that are relatives to brothers and sisters who are part of our churches in the Bekaa or in Beirut or in the south of Lebanon. Because in our churches, the Hope Evangelical churches, we have brothers and sisters in Christ. They are followers of Jesus from a Muslim background or from a traditional Christian backgrounds. So their families and their relatives were affected directly by the earthquake. And we were looking for ways of how to help their relatives through them. And this is why we were communicating with them and talking to them of how can we help and how can we support. And we send support to their families so that they continue and survive in this crisis. Of course, there are families that lost relatives, and in this case, we cannot do anything. But for those who lost their homes and they lost the place where they live, we send them support in order to rent a place or to provide the basic needs.
Bashir, you pointed out that the Hope Evangelical Church helped different churches in Syria. Earlier, I mentioned that the Heart for Lebanon Ministry Center and the Hope Evangelical Church are located 15 miles away from the Syrian border. And if I'm not mistaken, at that time, we were mentioning that in our warehouses in the Bekaa Valley, we had the number of blankets, winterization packages, family care packages of hygiene, food, and non-food items ready at our warehouse for the Lebanon response. But because that crisis happened, and after doing the math, it turned out that we can respond to both crises that month. And here, the big highlight of that event is preparedness. Bashir, what is the significance of preparedness in situations like this? In one instance, for example, the earthquake, we were the logistics center. We were the hub for logistics and support for whatever churches needed help to support their families and to support their people. Bashir, tell me more about the preparedness, how important it is for us to be prepared.
The church should play its role, and the church's role is to share the gospel, but at the same time is to take care of the poor and the people who are suffering. And this is what Jesus was doing. He was taking care of people in different ways. He was teaching them and he was feeding them. And Jesus had a compassionate heart. He had love toward everyone. And he was looking for the weak people and the poor. And we want to do what he wants us to do. The church in Lebanon, especially our church, is prepared for such a crisis. Of course, we had different items that were dedicated to the refugees in Lebanon or the Lebanese who are in need. But when the earthquake happened, we said this to ourselves: we cannot close our eyes, we cannot say that nothing is happening around and continue our lives normally. This is why we were ready to respond in the right way. And when we saw what happened in February 6th last year, and we saw the families who were affected by the earthquake, we planned to work with the local churches, and this is why we sent thousands of blankets to Syria, to the local churches and to the partners there to help the people in the areas that was affected by the earthquake.
Bashir, after 1 year of the devastating earthquake, after 1 year of our response to that crisis, how do you see that impact today? How do you see the change that Heart for Lebanon and the Hope Evangelical Church made on these churches, on these families? What change do you see happening?
Okay, we have seen families that came from Syria after the earthquake, and they were affected directly by the earthquake. They lost their homes, they lost everything there, and they were looking for a refuge, for a place or a safe place to live in. And in addition to the number that Lebanon has, the number of refugees, more than the half of our population in Lebanon are refugees. So more refugees came from Syria. They came and lived with their relatives, or they came and lived in unfinished buildings, or lived with in a tent, etc. So we responded directly with the people who were affected by the earthquake in Lebanon. Those who came to Lebanon were targeted or were getting support or got support from us directly. And till this day, we are still visiting them and taking care of them and giving them food packages and winter items according to the needs. So we are taking care of a number of people directly. Of course, there is a big impact in the lives of the families that we are working with here in Lebanon. So when we are visiting them, God is giving us the opportunity to share the gospel with them, telling them that there is still hope, and the hope is in Jesus. Because, such a people affected by the war first and later on by the earthquake, they lost every hope. And this is why our role as we visit them is to tell them that there is still hope. And even though they have passed through very difficult situations, God is alive and He is still working, and He can continue the journey with us. So the impact is big on the families that are living here in Lebanon, and they are visited by the volunteers or the team of the church directly. Talking about the impact that we did on the families in Syria, of course, we worked with local churches and we strengthened the work of the local churches there. Because the churches in Syria, let me be frank with you, they are very weak financially. And to face such a crisis without having any support, this is why our support to the local churches in Syria was a big blessing to them in order to face the crisis and to take care of the families who were affected by the earthquake in Aleppo, in Afrin, in Latakia, in different villages and cities in the northern part of Syria. So we strengthened the churches, the local churches in Syria, and we gave the churches the opportunity to take care of the people and support them, visit them, and in many cases also share the love of Christ with them.
Excellent, Bashir. It's so amazing to hear that not only do we respond as a church and as a ministry to the locals and the refugee population in Lebanon, but we're also having the opportunity, unfortunately, because of devastating and catastrophic events, but still it is an opportunity to serve and support churches, not only in Lebanon, but in the region as a whole. And earlier you mentioned, Bashir, the timeline of crises that Heart for Lebanon, the Hope Evangelical Church, has responded to since 2006. And I see a trend there. The trend is, and I've touched on this earlier, it's not a question of if there will be another crisis, whether it's man-made or a natural. The question is, when will the next crisis happen? And I cannot help but refer to the very nice verse in Proverbs 6:6-8. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer, it gathers its food at harvest, meaning that the ant prepares for winter. It has no manager, no boss, no ruler to tell the ant what to do, but it knows what to do. It knows that it needs to prepare food for the bad days or the challenging days.
Aya is a 12-year-old girl who lives in a displaced people's camp in southern Lebanon. When her family was in Syria, they faced the possibility of death countless times. Aya knows that in a war, there is always a chance of death, but at least you know where the dangerous zones are and you steer clear of them. Since last February, what scares Aya the most now, even in Lebanon, is the possibility of an earthquake. Because we have helped many families who were impacted by the devastating earthquake, many of the children we serve are living with this fear. Aya told us, really, you cannot escape it, no matter where you go. The very ground beneath you is opening its mouth to swallow you. My uncle's houses were leveled to the ground. Days passed since the earthquake hit, and we had not received any news about my uncles. At first, I lost faith in hearing any good news, and I blamed God for what had happened. I knew it was wrong, and I knew that I should not lose my faith. I have learned from Heart for Lebanon that we must not lose faith in God. I've learned that we should pray to Him and praise Him all the time. Though it was hard, I kneeled beside my bed and prayed out loud to God for Him to give us any news about my uncles. As I was about to finish praying, my mom screamed out loud, "Thank God!" I opened my eyes and asked her, "What is going on?" And she replied that both of my uncles were alive. Their houses were destroyed, but they and their families were alive and well. Aya has been an active participant in our Hope on Wheels clubs and has really matured in her faith over the last few years. Her faith was challenged when the earthquakes hit and her family was unaccounted for, but now she has more than a head knowledge of what faith is. She has personally experienced it in her life. Joyfully, Aya told us, "I could not but thank God with a big smile on my face, for this was a miracle in my opinion. I asked, and He delivered."
What's happening today in the south of Lebanon, what's been happening since October 7 with everything that's going on, Lebanon, it's getting its fair share of trouble. According to the United Nations flash update from 1 week ago, more than 76,000 individuals have been displaced from south of Lebanon, and 123 have been killed, 570 people wounded. And there's not full-on war, but it's taking all of the Lebanese population hostage to anxiety, to stress, to not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. And Heart for Lebanon is also responding to that in our South Ministry Center. So all this to say that I think it's our duty to be prepared to respond to the worst. It's our duty to love on people. It's our duty to give the people that assurance that we are here. We're not only the fire extinguisher that you should have, but hopefully you'll never use. We're the ministry that you should be coming to. We're the ministry that is there to help you through the worst days and the best days. We're there to love unconditionally. We're there to break the cycle of hatred, the cycle of violence, the cycle of despair through love and love alone, through Christ and Christ alone. Thank you, Bashir, for being with me on today's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode. We really appreciate your support, and without you, we cannot do any of this. A big thank you to our listeners, a big thank you to our supporters, to our investors. You're not only investing in a ministry in Lebanon, you're investing in changing people's lives. You're investing in breaking cycles of hatred that have been there for hundreds of years. You're investing in changing the face of the Middle East for the 100 and 200 years from today. So thank you for supporting us. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to comment on this episode and on other episodes. Tell us how we can do better. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you use. And until my next episode, God is with you. Allah ma'akum.